Very respect.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, welcome to Legal Tech Week for June 6th, 2025. Um, we might have a small panel for you this week. Expecting one more person at least. Who knows if anybody else will show up. But that's okay. We'll get you off on your weekend all that much sooner today if that's the case. But I'm Bob Ambrogi. I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And on our extensive panel this week, we also have Stephanie Wilkins.
Hi there. Yes, Stephanie Wilkins, Director of Content at Legal Tech Hub. See, my
And
answer's always so short. It doesn't really take up any time.
I know we need Nikki's long title too.
Yeah.
And Victor.
Hi, everyone. Victor Lee, Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. Yeah, well, the first time that I think one of her old titles like Legal Tech Evangelist or something, and so some of my copy editor was like, "That's not real. That can't be a real title." So he like refused to print it. But then finally, like Nikki like was just like, "Why won't you guys print my actual title?" So she actually like produced a business card that said Legal Tech Evangelist. We're like, okay,
Then Evangelist became a thing more.
yeah.
Yeah, I like
This
that
is like
title
this is
much
like 5 or 6 years
better.
ago. I never heard of this stuff. Yeah.
But then they replaced Legal Tech Evangelist with like 27 words in her title. So
And I think Julie Shabuali is joining us today, but
said yes. So
where and when, I don't know.
maybe
I
she's
hope so,
doing
because she's got, I don't know if
unrecorded.
anybody, she's got an interesting story to talk about this week. I don't know if
Fashionably
I
late,
think
I
she just
guess.
dropped it in a little bit a while ago, but about studying use of application of AI in criminal courts in Canada and Ontario, I think that looked kind of interesting. But we can talk about our stuff and get that. Oh, the other thing is, the other reason I wanted Nikki here. Oh, there's Julie.
There's Julie.
Julie. We were hoping you'd come.
Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties.
Yes, here in Canada. Are we doing intros?
We are now. Go
We are.
ahead.
Oh, okay.
We're up to you.
I, I'm now running the show. No, definitely not. Julie Shabwali, Canadian legal tech journalist. I write for the Canadian Bar Association, Canadian lawyer, and The Walrus, a general interest publication here in Canada. Greetings,
Yeah.
everyone.
Greetings. I'm glad you're here because I was just saying, I think your story is that you wanted to talk about this week looks really interesting. So if you want, we could kick it off right there if you want to start with that.
Wow, I'm getting like the VIP treatment today, folks. I like this. I'm gonna get used to this. Um, yeah, so the Law Commission of Ontario, which is an organization that looks at any type of legal topic in Ontario. We also have one for all of Canada. They looked at criminal law and AI, and this is by far the most comprehensive report I have seen of criminal law and AI. And it's not just restricted to what's happening in Canada. Lots of discussion of what's going on in the US and other jurisdictions because the report has a long series of questions that will be part of the LSO's future consultation this summer on what Canada should be doing when we're talking about criminal law and AI. So, what's really cool about the reports is it's not just like a general dump in terms of that topic. It goes through the life cycle of a file, right? So, there's one report about like how police and other agencies collect information or evidence using AI. There's another report about like what happens when you finally press charges, right? And that whole process, right? And then now we're into trial, now we're into sentencing. So I really think it's a really interesting way of looking at all these issues. And it touches on everything we've been talking about for weeks, right? Whether it's hallucinations, facial recognition, the way that different agencies are trying to use AI or not use AI, privacy issues, everything. And so, um, I talked to two of the people who wrote two of the reports, and lots of interesting discussion about where we're headed next, basically. And so, if you have time to read essentially five reports that I think are almost 100 pages each, I encourage you to read them. There are many, many, many good examples of what's going right and what's going wrong. But to me, the biggest takeaway are actually the questions themselves. Those are, I think, the right questions to ask, which is like, what should we use and what should we not use? So, for example, they use the example in the UK where there is like real-time facial recognition software that is being used right now in London. But they were like, well, if you as a police want to use that, you actually have to go through the courts and get permission before you use that because it's such a powerful tool, like real-time facial recognition. Is that something that we should even have at all? Like, is that something that's a no-go? So, anyway, I've thrown a lot of things out, but yeah, I thought it was a really interesting discussion that Ontario is leading the way.
This title of your story is Trustworthy Criminal AI. Was that meant to be oxymoronic, or was
Yes,
that?
yes.
Okay,
Thank you for
okay,
picking up on
okay.
it.
I wasn't sure.
Always, always.
Yeah. Did they talk
Why,
about
why
haptic body scanning at all?
We
Yeah, do I get the prize for the creepiest story I shared this week? Yeah.
As soon as you said body scanning, I had inappropriate images in my head.
Well,
Well, those tools are kind of inappropriate. You saw the
Yeah,
story I shared in our Slack. Yeah.
you should
yeah,
explain what that
absolutely.
was, Stephanie. But
Go ahead. I'll let Julie finish there first, and then I'll talk about haptic body scanning.
okay, okay.
No, I feel like we're in a perfect segue right
You're
now
like,
to
please
talk
do. Yeah.
about haptic body scanning.
Well,
Yeah,
this is not the story I was going to talk about today, but I found I don't even remember what publication it was on. But
it
it
was
maybe
in.
404 Media because because
Yeah,
they don't pull any punches. They're amazing. About how they're starting to roll out these like VR haptic body scans for TSA. So with these gloves, so they can like virtually pat you down and feel your whole body, but you don't feel them doing it. And I actually think it's creepier than just being touched and knowing where they touch you.
and it didn't
yeah,
say
yeah, you
it
gotta
can
wonder
also
who came
see
up
through
with
your
that.
clothes or something.
Yeah,
Well,
it
yeah, well,
did.
it renders like a 3D rendering of your body.
I'm sure that technology will be used in a responsible,
Uh-huh.
safe way with no consequences whatsoever for the people that it's being used. No, like
Yeah.
it's so disgusting on so many levels. This is why I use the real-time facial recognition as an example. I didn't realize that jurisdictions are already using technology where like not only are they scanning your faces, they're doing it in real time using AI so they can identify you pretty much on the spot as you're walking
Yeah.
around in public spaces. And now we're creating technology that's like, let's just scan the whole thing. Scan the whole thing, and if we want
It's
to
also
like,
like,
Yeah.
feel
Well, the thing about the
around.
facial recognition thing, I thought was interesting from your story. Is like, they actually got permission from the courts first up in Canada, because here we would be like, it's better to ask for forgiveness and ask for permission, I think. So we definitely have that mentality of kind of like, oh, we're just going to use it, and then if the courts slap us down, then we'll figure out something else.
Or just keep doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or keep doing it, just call it something else. But yeah, it's always funny because I mean, so like um, I traveled recently just to New York just on the plane, and like I've had pre-check for so long I forgot all the hoops that you have to jump through if you have to go
oh
through
yeah.
regular check-in because I made a mistake on my boarding pass, so I didn't get the pre-check this time. So I forgot you to take off your shoes. I forgot you to take off your belt. I forgot you to do like all this other stuff. And so it's just kind of like, so what? Now I'm gonna have to like get patted down by like some guy with a VR set, and like he's gonna get his jollies, but I'm not. I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know about that.
You're saying you want
Oh,
reciprocal patting down? Is that no?
yeah.
I mean, it's only fair, right? I mean, if they're
Yeah.
gonna they're gonna if they're gonna they're gonna violate my if they're gonna violate my rights without buying me dinner, then it's like, hey.
Well, yeah, because like at least when they're being aggressive, actually physically, you can be like, "Hey, what the heck?" There, you don't know what they're doing when they're just like this guy with a mask and hands.
Hmm.
I really hope you screenshot that of our thing today.
Yeah, that'll be the clip. That's the clip, Stephanie. Right? Yep, exactly it. Wasn't there a scandal at the beginning? Like, I forget what those big machines are to scan us. Wasn't there
Yeah,
Uh,
a
oh,
data leak of all the
Oh yeah.
images or
Right.
something
yeah.
years ago?
that was a big thing. Like I think like 10 or so years ago. Because I remember, yeah, like it was the thing that it turns over, it does a 360 and takes like a whole image of you, and it's supposed to delete it like immediately afterward. But
Right. But that's another good reason to be on TSA pre because you don't have to go through those bizarre machines.
yeah,
Well, it feels like everyone's in TSA pre now because like I feel like there's tons of people in TSA pre-check that still don't know how to go through a line, and like the lines are longer. I'm not complaining. I'll still keep doing it. Maybe it was just Vegas. Like everyone in the Vegas airport had TSA pre-check, so it was just not a fun scene.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, a lot of people have like TSA pre-check. The travel lounges I've noticed are like packed to the brim. Like everyone is, there is a huge wait list here in Canada for not just pre-clearance as well internationally. Like I think people are trying to skip all these lines because post-pandemic, like I don't need you like more lines, more touching, all of this. So if for all these like I have pre-check as well. For all of us pre-check people, will they still be doing the scan thing for us or can we skip that? Skip that
Hmm.
experience. I would hope so.
But I do agree though.
No,
Like
no haptic body sources.
no, I do pack totally differently though. If I know, even if the line is the same length, I pack differently if I know I have to take stuff out of my bag versus not. But anyway.
Yeah. I have clear, which is sometimes good because the pre TSA pre line can be so long, but now sometimes the clear line is like slower than the TSA pre line, so you never know. Kind of got to scope it out. But the nice thing about clear, actually, maybe TSA pre does this now with the new digital, what do they call real ID thing. Once you've scanned it in one time, you don't have to show it again.
oh,
So that's a good thing.
And welcome to our travel podcast.
And welcome to our show. Yes, the points guy here. Next week, we'll have the points guy on. I actually did want to go back to the study of the criminal justice AI and criminal justice that Julie talked about, only because it was curious as to whether it wasn't clear whether are they making recommendations at this point? Are they just kind of raising questions at this point that they plan to then go further and explore? Are they raising red flags about any of this? What's the sort of if I were to read through the multiple 100-page reports, what would I be finding there?
Yeah, I think for them, you know, because of where we are in Canadian politics, and I know everyone on the call knows exactly what I'm talking about. So basically, after Trudeau stepped away, there was kind of like, when are we going to
Wait,
have
Trudeau
more
stepped away.
I know we have a whole brand new prime minister now. Um, and so when I was talking to Ryan at LSO, he was like, we didn't know when we were going to essentially release this, right? Because they also didn't know what kind of federal government they would have. And so now not only do we have a liberal government, we actually have an AI minister in the cabinet, which for the first time in Canadian history. So now everything's kind of set for them to be like, hey, let's make some recommendations because the LSO has done this in the past. They have consulted with the government to update our privacy laws and other tech laws. The old law that was going to update all of our data privacy act and everything was universally panned and hated. Like all the academics came together and agreed on one thing that that wasn't the solution. And so I think the reason why this report is so comprehensive and why there's so many questions is because they're trying to set themselves up as the expert to be like, now that you guys have said AI is a priority, like the new prime minister has made this very clear, we have to change our laws for all kinds of reasons. And so they want to set themselves up as one of those key players to kind of set the tone for new policy. So they're just saying it a little bit indirectly because they weren't sure in terms of timing and also the type of government. If we had a different government, which is what most people were anticipating, we wouldn't actually be having this conversation. We would be having a different conversation. So I think that's why they're kind of being a little tiptoeing around there. Um, really what the purpose of all of this is, right? Like the whole idea of consultation, I was like, well, what do you mean by consultation? They're like, oh, well, people can just email me. I'm like, okay, but that's great. But like, do you mean like a formal consultation process? What's the whole point of that? And I think it really is to influence policy
Hmm.
because Canada is definitely going to have to make a choice within the next 12 to 18 months? Are we going to follow the US model or the European model of how we regulate AI? And probably the answer is neither, that we're going to have to create our own specific approach. And how we do that and how that's going to influence the global market is still TBD.
I was say, I hope you guys don't follow the U.S. model because, of course, you guys have an AI minister. We have an entire House of Congress that passed a 10-year ban on enforcing AI laws at the state and local level. So I hope you guys don't follow that.
Wait. I'm behind. When did that happen?
Oh, it wasn't Trump's big beautiful
His
bill.
big beautiful
That's
bill.
that's the real title, by the way. I couldn't have come up with a more. I couldn't have come up with a better title myself, to be honest with you. But yeah, well, it got stripped out in the Senate version, so we'll see if it we'll see if it we'll see if it gets what happens in the reconciliation process or whatnot. I mean, it might just end up not going through. But yeah, the House passed it as part of the their version of the bill.
Yep.
So I can't be the only one, right? Who, when you said we have an AI minister, immediately thought you had like a robot or an avatar in government. Like it took me a second.
To be fair, I should have clarified that he's a human person who's in charge of AI and innovation. Because I really could
I
have
mean, I
been,
got there pretty
yeah, no,
quickly, but initially I was like, that's yeah, that's
no,
cool.
no, that's true. I should have clarified. He could be a robot or a program or an algorithm or he or she or they. That's not. So yeah, no, real person. Former
Yeah.
journalist, by the way, who is yeah, it's a whole thing. Been a big conversation here.
Yeah. Someday the AI minister will be AI. We had Elon Musk. He was sort of our AI minister, but he
Yeah,
we're
that's
not quite sure where he is these days.
Yeah, emphasis on artificial.
Well, I
Yeah.
believe he's in a beef with a certain ex-best friend right now,
I mean,
ex-BF.
that's going exactly the way we all thought that was going to go. No.
Hey, their bromance
Yeah.
lasted a lot longer than I thought it would.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't think it would even last till like inauguration day. I thought they would fall out before that. So
I definitely would have lost on the over under of when it would happen, but yeah.
So it's funny because somebody asked in the chat about what was the big embargo news that we couldn't talk about last week. None of us even thought to put it on the story log this week.
I
That's
thought
how
of
big
it.
it was.
I literally Monday seems like 2 weeks ago. I would not have believed that was still this week.
It was just last week, though, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it was Monday is
yeah,
when we
yeah.
published stuff.
Right.
So let's
But
talk about it.
so what it was Thomson Reuters' announcement of its agentic version of co-counsel. It's agentic co-counsel. Do they even have a name for it? I forget. Agentic co-counsel AI or something.
No,
Um,
it's not a product. It's just
it's
agents
just
sitting there.
co-counsel.
Hmm.
It's just what co-counsel is now. So yeah, all right. And so they had this big media briefing in New York, and then they had a separate Zoom media briefing to focus more on the legal side of it. So they basically had two briefings, which were apparently identical. I only went to one of them. But they actually rolled this out for some tax and finance products, or for their products for tax and finance professionals. And a lot of the live briefing in New York last week was sort of kind of focused on that, and then legal as a little bit of a sideshow. The legal version of that is supposed to be coming out at some point this summer. But it's basically, I mean, it is agentic AI that's sort of capable of performing a series of tasks, and doing some reasoning and research, and bringing you to a result. And they were, you know, I felt kind of, I mean, the legal side are pretty short on specifics at this point. I mean, kind of giving some examples of creating different kinds of agreements or something, which, um, looking at practical law, and doing some research in Westlaw, and putting together and going into Word or whatever and creating an agreement. But I don't know what it could be very impressive. I just don't know yet.
Yeah, I went to both of the briefings. And I think the legal part, it was basically the same, at least in terms of demo. as we saw at the live one. I think the most interesting part was them answering a few questions that people asked. But yeah, the whole thing is that once they did was a year or two ago that they expanded co-counsel to all their business units. So it's not just legal. They're starting with their agentic framework in the other co-counsel products when legal co-counsel will get the agents this summer, and there will be like a prompt library of 50 plus prompts or something. But yeah, the announcement was not the legal focused part.
Yeah, even the 50 prompt, they talked about the 50 prompts, and then when I asked them if they could give me a list of the 50 prompts, and they said, well, we're not quite sure yet how many there's going to be, and we're still working on them. So even that wasn't quite clear. There were a lot of TBDs in the presentation, but it was interesting that they had made as big a splash as, I mean, there were other sort of mainstream reporters there.
Oh,
Wall
yeah.
Street Journal was there, and I don't know who else.
The,
Nobody from Reuters was there, but
the live New York event was definitely, I think, intended for mainstream media and just a few of us tacked on. And then the call on Friday was legal specific.
yeah.
But
Well, a certain unnamed member of our panel apparently had asked about going to the one in New York and was told that it was only for mainstream media. So I guess that makes us mainstream media. I don't know.
Fancy.
Julie, why are you wincing at
No, I'm just kind of like, what is
that?
this sounds so New York centric the more we get into it. But like, I mean, you're already mainstream, but come on. We all know your legacy here. But like, yeah, I saw that in the chat and I was like, what? So if there's two, I didn't know there were two briefings. I thought there was just the one. I didn't know there was a legal one. So if you
yeah.
having a legal one, then why are you not?
I think it was honestly just a courtesy because other than Bob, who's special, the handful of us from legal that were invited to the New York one were New York adjacent anyway. Like I live in New York. And I think they were just being like, oh, you're close. I don't want to feel like I left you out kind of thing. So
Yeah, and to be clear, the others were invited to the Zoom version of it. That
yeah.
they were not
Okay.
excluded from that. It was
Yeah.
the live one. So yeah, I think anyway.
It was good.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting and definitely worth following. It was not, as somebody said, the Harvey and I Manage announcement, which I actually didn't even see until I saw it on Troman's blog the other day.
Yeah, I just put up something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
full partnership integration between Harvey and iManage. So like if you're in Harvey, you can access documents straight out of iManage. You can save documents or whatever you're doing in Harvey straight to iManage. A little bit light on details, but like very full, complete integration as far as I understand.
yeah. Well, there was another partnership this week that you did write about, Stephanie,
Yes.
and we can turn to that one.
Yes, I agree with Horace that it was the big news because I wrote about it. But, yeah, this is super interesting to me, this Legalzoom and Perplexity partnership. Oh, thank you, Horace, as it should. All my news comes from you. This is why I was invited to the mainstream media journal party. But yeah, so partnership between Perplexity and LegalZoom, which is being said, and I don't have anything to contradict this, but first partnership between legal services and an AI provider. But so the way it works, the way I understand it, and I do have a lot of questions about this, but the way it works is like if for Perplexity Plus, Perplexity Pro, is that what it's called? They're $20.
Yeah,
They're paid.
Pro, yeah,
They're pro service level.
Yep.
If you're one of those subscribers and you type in legal questions, all of your answers are fed through LegalZoom. It's fed, you get access to LegalZoom content via Perplexity. And it also, there's like discounts and other things as part of the partnership that I'm not entirely sure how they work, but so for the way they said it is LegalZoom wants to be the legal provider for Perplexity Pro subscribers. I don't know why I can't say Perplexity Pro, but
it's a mouthful.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you.
it's a lot of peas. Um, which I think is really interesting. I think it comes back to a lot of the like the age-old questions we talk about, about access to justice versus et cetera. My most practical questions come down to, LegalZoom only handles a certain kind of legal work. It's like individuals, small businesses, certain levels or certain, lower stakes kind of, if you will, legal services. And if you ask it a question that is beyond the purview of what LegalZoom provides in its services, what does Perplexity do? Does it resort to normal chatbot behavior where now it just goes and searches, the internet and gives you an answer? Does it say, I can't answer that because it's not from LegalZoom? Does it distinguish between those two and tell people the difference? So in addition to a lot of other questions, that was just functionally my very first question about how it works. I'm sure there'll be UPL complaints, but LegalZoom has been sued how many times on UPL, and they'll be able to handle that. I don't necessarily see otherwise, like if everyone else is rolling Gen AI into their tools, why can't you just kind of do the reverse and roll a tool into Gen AI? I think it is really interesting from the Perplexity perspective, though, because they made another announcement like the next day about how they're offering they're like embedding all SEC and Edgar research right into their product as well. So it seems like they're doing a really big legal play here, and I'm fascinated to see how that rolls out.
So I was definitely confused about exactly what they've announced because I am a Perplexity Pro customer, and so I said, okay, I'm going to go in and ask some legal questions and see what happens. And I did several legal questions, and LegalZoom only showed up as in one of them as only one of the sources listed. So
Hmm.
it's possible it hasn't actually been implemented yet. And I wrote to their PR person or something. I wrote to like PR or LegalZoom. Didn't get an answer, but I don't know what the timing is. But like I threw like a softball one, like how do I form a corporation in the state of New York or something, which is LegalZoom. I mean, that's what people use it for, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one where like LegalZoom showed up as one of many results, but there was also Justia and other legal sources, and plus New York Corporation Law and Secretary of State and stuff like that were all sources that showed up. So it didn't jump out as LegalZoom having any special standing in the result.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's 100% rolled out yet or what. Yeah, I just like I said, I have just a lot of questions.
But the
And
SEC stuff
according
is
to
interesting though,
the
because didn't we do like didn't we do an episode a few weeks ago where we talked about like a study where like that was like one of the main deficiencies for like some of the main players that like the SEC Edgar stuff was not on there or wasn't like sufficient or whatnot. So yeah, so if they figured out a way to do it, then hey, good for them.
Oh, yeah, well, it was in that Val's AI study, the SEC Edgar task. Everyone dropped out of except Vecflow, and they did not as well as the humans, but they're the only ones that actually offered up their results on it. So it was just sort of very poor activity on that research front.
hmm Yeah, I like what I'm just looking at the press release, and strategic partnership doesn't sound to me like exclusivity. And
Yeah.
that's an issue, right?
Right.
Um because I don't see like it goes back to the I like the questions you're asking, Stephanie. Like if you're not if people are going to ask legal questions that are beyond LegalZoom's like bread and butter, then Perplexity is going to want other sources, right? Like Edgar and others. So I don't see why they would be exclusive with any one of these platforms, right? And so, Jasmine is saying in the chat, basically a sponsored Google listing, which is ouch, but hey, and to be honest, that would still be better than what we have right now.
Yep.
Okay?
hmm
Like that's still a step above. Because these LLMs need actual like legal data, like good legal data, and we need it in a way that can be easily curated and all the things, like all the general best practices of this. So yeah, so when I read it, I first thought, oh, this is great. I want more strategic partnerships between all these orgs. And yeah, and I really, 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 really hope we can be done with UPLs and LegalZoom. Like, I don't know why bars want to continue to waste their time and money when LegalZoom is just like, I'm sure happy. Yep. When do you want us to show up? Yep. Fine.
Yeah, I know. Like, if anyone can handle that lawsuit, they're like, done it before. Here we are.
Exactly. And I can already see the dumb headlines now of like, you know, Barr taking AI to court for UPL, which I've been waiting for. I'm waiting for this so that public opinion could be like, ugh, I don't like that. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but like in terms of impact, I wonder if it's going to have a huge impact.
Well, you'll have to, as you're a subscriber, Bob, you'll have to let us know. I'm not a marketer, but I would assume if this was a big deal, maybe Perplexity would tell its customers they now have legal advice or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't know.
Mhm.
So you'll have to
Well,
tell.
Well, they probably can't say we're offering legal advice. Yeah.
I know. As soon as I said legal advice, I knew that was the
Yeah.
wrong legal
But
access to legal services.
I
Yeah.
did go back this morning and ask Perplexity when this partnership will take effect in terms of information showing up for Perplexity users. And it quoted the press release saying it wasn't sure. So, so that wasn't very helpful. But I don't know. It definitely interesting. I think it also raises the question. I mean, I think we've all kind of talked about this a little bit, but with not just with reference to the SEC data and that sort of thing, but so many of these LLM, the commercial LLM models are just getting so powerful and they have such incredible research capabilities that you just kind of wonder at one point legal specific products become irrelevant, or do they become irrelevant because the just general commercial products can do everything the legal specific ones can do and more. So I don't know. I mean, if Thomson Reuters has agentic AI, that's great. And right now it's great because Thomson Reuters does have, practical law and extensive database and all that. But if these other companies are able to build out their collection of legal materials, or if they want to do that, then who knows? All right. So I guess this raises questions for law firms that may be perplexed about how to bring AI into their firms, and
Was perplexed your hook there? Was that your
that was
That was it. I saw
that
it.
was it.
perplexity
I
That
to
was
saw
it.
that.
perplex? I love it.
This
That
is
was
why
it.
he's mainstream stuff.
Oh, I
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Mainstream.
Even not in
Peter
New York, he came down. He
Peter
was right.
Piper picked a Perplexity Pro something.
See, he can say that too. He's
Yeah.
superior in all the ways.
But Victor, so Victor has a story on how law firms are turning to consultants and experts and helping them figure out the maze or morass or whatever of AI.
Yeah, so this was one my reporter Danielle Braff. She came up with this idea because actually this came out of Tech Show because I mean one of the common complaints that you get about Tech Show is that and this is even before all the generative AI stuff happened. One of the common complaints is that people get bombarded with so much information while they're there. They walk down the expo hall and there's like a million vendors. They all have like these wonderful products that are going to completely change their lives and make them, a million times more efficient and blah blah. So it's kind of like, how do you start? What do you do to kind of even get started with like implementing even some of these potential solutions into your practice? So she kind of took it from the angle of like, okay, with all these generative AI products, if you don't know what you're doing or you don't know how to get started, what's a good way to get started? So one way that you can do is you can hire someone to come in and help you implement these tasks into your practice. And they range from like people that work with small firms to people that work with larger firms and whatnot. The prices are obviously depends on what you're looking for. It was just a story about sort of like how just for the people who are kind of in that position of kind of they have so many they're being told by all these vendors and all these clients, all the other people that okay, you have to use this, you have to use that, you have to use this. What's a way to kind of figure out that first step of like, okay, what do I actually need for my practice, and how do I implement it into my practice and into my daily life? So it's just for people out there who are still kind of struggling with that, and I get it because yeah, like just even with all the stuff that we're talking about on this show, some of it's hard to keep everything straight and keep everything track. Like, okay, well, this product does this part does that. This is the best thing for my practice if I want to do this. And half the time I don't even know like Yeah, I mean, just now when I had the brain fart about the SEC thing, thankfully Stephanie knew what I was talking about. So yeah, it's just all these things that are being bombarded with, and this is just a good way to kind of get started and kind of go from that paralysis into like step one of an actual plan.
Yeah, I have a question about this. Is this similar to like you guys remember the trend of like the chief information officer or it's kind of similar like that, right? We were talking about like we need to know where our data is. Again, all Gen AI and all of this, right? Gotta leverage your data in the firms. Is this kind of similar, or is this somebody who's gonna come in and be like, let's test out a few things using what you have in your firm to try and
It's more of like
figure
an
out where to
outside
go?
consultant. Yeah, it's more of
Okay.
an outside like it's I liken it to in Pulp Fiction when they call him the wolf to clean up
Oh,
the mess. It's like you call Harvey Keitel into your firm and then he troubleshoots everything for you. Maybe he doesn't clean up any dead bodies, but if you're that type of firm, then you got other problems rather than just what AI you're going to use. But yeah, it's just it's like outside consultants and they're I guess again it's also another good way to kind of like you see what the market is doing, you see where the demand is, and you kind of go where the demand is. And right now there is some demand with law firms, so they're making a nice killing right now. These outside consultants.
I
the
love
fix.
how AI is actually creating jobs in the legal market. Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like a whole um, industry around these legal tech consultants in general who work with law firms on picking the right practice management software or time and billing or whatever. So it's not surprising that ones would come along kind of specializing in AI products. It's just for me the biggest surprise is it took this long for it to really start happening. It would have started, people would have started coming out of the woodwork. Consultants would have started coming out of the woodwork almost immediately, and they probably did. But
yeah.
we're just talking about it now. But it makes a lot of sense, especially for smaller,
Mhm.
mid-sized firms that don't have their in-house IT people
Mm-hmm.
to do this or innovation.
AI minister.
Or evangelist.
AI,
Yes.
AI
They're
evangelist.
human or machine. This is we don't need to, pigeonhole our AI ministers here.
Yep. All right, anything on that?
No.
Um,
No,
so
I'm waiting to see how you segue into the next story. That's where I'm
well,
kind of.
I don't have a segue. But the segue is it's the last story I have to talk about on our list today. We might have to beat the bushes to see if there's anything else to talk about. But what I wrote about this week was I'll put mine in the chat. The latest report from Stanford's um, what do they call it? The Deborah Rhodey Center for the Legal Profession at Stanford Law School. Uh, So 5 years ago, we all know we've talked about it a million times on this show. Both Utah and Arizona uh, enacted their regulatory reform programs aimed at Utah creating sandbox and Arizona creating these alternative business structures to get around some of the restrictions on like, ownership of law firms and unauthorized practice of law. They were, everybody, I'm sure, much considered very revolutionary at the time. A lot of people thought that was going to be the dominoes falling all across the country, and other states would quickly follow suit. That hasn't happened yet. There's some dominoes kind of wobbling a little bit, but they haven't quite fallen yet. Um, but so 2 years into that, and one of the hallmarks of both the Arizona and the Utah program was sort of aggressive data gathering about these programs, so we can really monitor what's working, what's not, what's the impact on access to justice, um, and so 2 years into that, or 3 years ago now, Stanford did sort of pull together all the data and did the first kind of comprehensive evidence-based analysis of these reform movements in Utah and Arizona. And um, probably the big headline out of that was that they seemed to be working. They were actually helping to enhance access to justice in some ways. And guess what? There was no consumer harm that anybody had been able to find, and it seemed to actually be helping consumers more so in Utah than in Arizona, which has been kind of more of a lot of the ABSs there have been kind of more small business focused than really access to justice focused. Anyway, this week, the Stanford people went back now 5 years in and crunched the numbers and looked at the data all over again to see where this all stands now. And it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit um, um, much more mellow in a sense in terms of the findings, I think, in terms of what they found going on there. I think particularly in Utah, because there really was kind of a political backlash in Utah to this, and the Utah legislature kind of threatened to, or actually did, I forget, uh, talk about passing a law to restrict the sandbox program. I think the Supreme Court in Utah finally stepped in and implemented sort of a version 2 of the sandbox that limited the kinds of programs that could be approved and um, who could be qualified to be approved in one of those programs. And so the interesting one of the interesting outcomes of that has been that from their 2022 study to now, Arizona grew from 19 entities in this program to 136 as of April, or a 6 times increase, whereas Utah contracted from 39 entities in 2022 to 11 now. And again, a lot of that was simply due to the sort of political restrictions pushed by not just the legislature, but the bar and others in Utah. That was an interesting turn of events, I think. And then I thought something else interesting, if I can find it in my notes here, was the uh, the fact that there's been a lot of sort of criticism or concern in Arizona about the rise of the PI firms or personal tort lawyer, personal injury kind of focused programs that are happening in Arizona. Something like 17 of the entities in Arizona are owned by these litigation funding firms or venture capital firms. Approximately half of the entities in Arizona are focused on personal injury or mass tort cases in some way. And of the private equity owned ones, 14 of the 17 are backed by private equity. And a number of these entities that have been formed in Arizona are not really focused on Arizona at all. They're just using Arizona as a base for kind of operating nationally, and being able to have a little more being able to be owned by private equity as opposed to by lawyers. So I think those are some concerns about it. I think again, counter to what a lot of people have thought about what would happen with reform, the basic business models still tend to be largely law firm like, and lawyers tend to be very heavily involved. There's been a growth in these sort of what they call one-stop shops, which are entities that combine legal services with other kinds of professional services like accounting or financial planning or that kind of thing. Um, and there is still they are still mostly focused on consumers in some way, but not so heavily on access to justice really. So it's a little bit of an eye-opening look, I think, at where we are 5 years in on these. I don't know if you can even call them experiments anymore. I mean, Arizona is a pretty past the experimental stage. Utah, I think, is still maybe an experiment, I guess, or a work in progress. But but and then they talk a little bit about what's going on in other states, but still nothing. I mean, I think Minnesota now is the one that's maybe next up in terms of talking about using sort of more AI enabled, promoting AI enabled options for providing legal services and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't know if anybody else had a chance to look at that report or read it, but it's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we talked about it on this show, like, I think when it first happened, when Utah first, like, just with what's going on in Utah and how they, kind of made some of the regulations a little more stringent, and how they, how they define sort of like access to justice and what would qualify, and then, yeah, how that led to, I think, how that led to like a lot of firms or ventures, whatever, leaving, and yeah, that does kind of raise the question, sort of like, well, if your goal is to ultimately bridge the access to justice gap, but then you make it so difficult for vendors or firms or whatnot to operate, then it's kind of like how you're going to bridge that access to justice gap, and it almost becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But I mean, but I think I do kind of understand the reasoning behind it, because it's like, well, yeah, if they felt like a lot of firms and ventures and whatnot were just coming in there just trying to experiment with outside funding or whatnot that didn't have any kind of access to justice component to it, then what was the point? And maybe that's what the Arizona thing is not surprising to see that happening in Arizona, because since they went the extra step and actually changed their rules and made it and made it so these firms and companies and whatnot could come in. It's probably not a surprise to see more of that happening in Arizona as opposed to what was going on in Utah. But yeah, so I spoke with one of the people at LegalZoom for a podcast that comes out next month. Sort of like asking them about, actually, no, I guess it comes out later this month. Sorry, and I forgot we're in June already. I'm still in May. And
I'm still
so
in April.
Yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say May is generous.
yeah. Um, and so I asked them because I wanted to know like what was going on in Arizona, and sort of like now that they've been there for a few years now, what's happening there, and what have they seen and what have they done? And I asked them, I was like, how come they focused on businesses as opposed to individuals? Because you would think Arizona, with their large population of retirees and elderly people and whatnot, that would feed right into their business model of trust in estates and things like that. And I guess what they said was that, like, you know, they haven't ruled anything out, but one of the reasons why they focus on businesses is because they felt like a lot of the small businesses in Arizona, especially like, like the very, very small ones, they saw a need for giving them intellectual property information and whatnot. And a lot of these businesses probably couldn't afford legal services or representation. So that was their way of kind of saying, well, we are bridging access to scrap only for businesses, not necessarily for individuals, but a lot of these are individuals who own businesses, and a lot of them are, maybe one or two person shops. So that's sort of, again, that kind of gets into the weeds a little bit on details and how you define bridging the gap and whatnot. But yeah, but just you would think with Utah just restricting it so much, that you end up then shooting yourself in the foot by not then bridging that gap.
Yeah, I think you're making a lot of good points. It's really interesting reading this retrospective. I know Joshua put in the chat that what's happening in Arizona really mirrors what happened in the UK when they first opened ABS, which is pretty spot on. Um, and the political pressure in Utah cannot be understated. As somebody who spoke to people during that time about what was going on, and we all know, in terms of the limiting of the sandbox, and um, I think the sandbox fad has come and gone in some respects. Even when we talk about, I know we talk about it still in the scope of AI adoption, but now, look at the report from Clio and others. Like, I mean, AI is being so widely used at this point. Like, really, what are we sandboxing if everyone's already using it? So, um, yeah, I think we're at a crossroads here a little bit, right? If the goal is to,
Which they
because I
say in the report. They use
as
that
they
word.
say in the report. That's right. That's right. See, this is why you're mainstream. Like I feel like, if the goal is access to justice, and we know that very few people are getting any kind of access. I agree with the argument about small business, right? Small business owners are usually family businesses, for example, right? Restaurants, that's like half of them right there. So that actually is an access to justice issue. It's not typically the kind of access to justice issue we're talking about, right? Like, I mean, like the article I wrote about with criminal law, obviously there's a huge access to justice component for that. That's totally separate from when we're talking about small business or, like you said, retirement planning or wills and estates, right? These are just very different issues, very different kind of clients. Um, and if we're going to focus regulatory reform on that, I think I've been in different circles, I've been clear on this. It's UPL. Like to me, it's UPL. If we really want to reach people like on the ground, housing, social assistance, those type of issues, it's UPL because there are people who, whether it's navigator programs, all the type of things that people want to do. And I believe that court case is still going on in New York, right? With the folks who do good work there. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going to reach there. And obviously, we saw from the political pressures in Utah with the sandbox, which of course had very wide ambitions when it first started. Like we just couldn't get there because of the pushback, right? So in terms of what's happening in Arizona, I'm kind of quite heartened by the increase of numbers, um, and a little disheartened by what's going on with Utah, but not surprised. But yeah, I really think we kind of have to deal with the issues at hand. And this is where I like that AI is in the mix of this. You cannot stop AI with UPL. As soon as a big major AI UPL case comes, like we're just like our industry and our profession is going to look silly to the public. Because it's happening already. We already know it's happening already. We already know people are using AI for legal stuff that is beyond legal information. So um but yeah, but I think in terms of this, some really good insights from Stanford because and also this was all done before the pandemic, before Gen AI. Like where we are is so different now. Like, can you
Mhm.
imagine if Utah and Arizona decided to do this right now, the sandbox and ABS in this moment in time? I just wonder, like, would things be a little bit different because we kind of have a little bit more of an audience for
Mhm.
this stuff
Yeah,
because of
for sure.
AI. So yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
right after the pandemic, there seemed to be like a little bit of a momentum for this. Like California was looking at stuff. California was looking at modifying their rules. I think New York was toying with it as well. And if those two do it, then it's like that's pretty much the ball game. But then California, I mean, some people push back. A lot of people push back in California, and then that became an issue. And then New York didn't go as far as I think a lot of people thought they would, which didn't surprise me. If I mean, for I think most people probably weren't surprised by that. So I think it's probably more surprised that they were willing to even consider those steps to begin with, as opposed to even taking tentative steps toward whatever the ultimate goal would have been. And then if anything, I think it kind of lost a little bit of momentum until generative AI started kicking off. So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see where this next wave, if you want to call it a wave, where that goes. I mean, with Minnesota and then with Washington getting back into it, as we talked about before in this program, it'll be interesting to kind of see where those things kind of go, and if that leads to more states kind of following along.
It is interesting that the report talks about Arizona has the ABS only approach, and Utah ABS plus UPL. So Arizona really just changed the ownership model, but leaving the UPL laws in place basically, whereas Utah also loosened the UPL laws, which is why in the 2-year report they were finding Utah was much more effective at addressing some of the low income access to justice issues than Arizona had been. And even the programs that are currently operating in Utah are more focused on, again, people who can't afford a lawyer and getting access to legal help for people who can't afford a lawyer. So that I think, Julie, like I said, it's all about the UPL ultimately is what it comes down to, but in both ways in terms of opposition and support. Um,
Yeah, and we should mention Oregon too and what they're
Yeah.
trying to do there with
yeah.
paralegals and some
Yeah.
of the other type of licensing models. And I forget other state, I think Nevada and a few others are also looking at licensing and those kind of things. I feel like these are indirect ways of chipping away at UPL, which I'm all for. Please do it.
Yeah.
Because we've seen, at least in my jurisdiction, that's a soft launch into more of this discussion, right? As you bring more people into being licensed. Yeah.
All right, well, we have made it through the hour with a minimal panel and a minimal list of topics, but we seem to have plenty to talk about today. Next week is Friday the 13th, so that should be interesting.
Ooh, seems like should be some sort of pun day.
Or we could just do all P alliteration, or we can only talk about things where there's P alliteration of some kind.
It's gonna be a
Directly
full
Perplexity,
moon
plural.
too. I may not want to be here. There's gonna be a full moon too on Friday the 13th. This
Oh,
Oh.
don't miss
okay,
it.
on the 11th. Okay.
Don't miss it. All right. Yeah, we'll have some horror stories.
There's plenty of that in this
Plenty,
this day and age.
plenty of legal AI horror stories.
Or just horror stories in general.
Oh boy. Now I'm afraid
Okay.
of what's going to happen between now and next week. I feel like we just something in the
Oh,
air.
that's so true. I stop jinxing us. Stop.
No, not gonna
And
jinx
he's
us.
mainstream. They listen to
Okay,
him.
that's a jinx for sure.
We're just here to tell what happened. We're not here to experience it. All right. Well, thanks to everybody, and appreciate everybody joining us today. And we will be here next Friday, come hell or high water. So join us then.
Bye, everyone.
Hi,
See
everyone.
ya.